My name is Ralph. I'm an alcoholic. My home group is the Main Purpose Group. We meet in Milford, Connecticut. We meet on Zoom 7 nights a week at 7 p.m. I'll put the info in the chat. I want to thank you guys for showing up again this week. We're at XXIX, second paragraph in. We're going to finish this chapter today and move on. And, I just want to tell you guys a quick story about old timers. There was these two old timers at the club that I got sober at, right? And they loved Alcoholics Anonymous. They loved everything in the world about Alcoholics Anonymous. They even loved the coffee. They loved the business meeting. And most of all, they loved the fellowship and helping other alcoholics and seeing each other recover. Well, one day these two guys were sitting after the meeting and they started talking to each other and they said, hey, I wonder if there's Alcoholics Anonymous in heaven. And they thought about it and they said, oh my God, there better be. What are we going to do, when we pass? And anyways, so after some further discussion, they made a decision that whoever died first, the other one would try and come back and let the other one know whether it was Alcoholics Anonymous meetings in heaven. Wouldn't you know, about a week later, one of the guys passes. The other guy was totally devastated. They had the typical AA funeral, about 30 family members and about 200 AA people. And that guy just was showing up at the meetings and he was just like wondering what was going on. And about a month later, he's in the coffee room making coffee and his friend appears and he's all excited. And he goes, oh my God. He goes, do we have meetings? Tell me what the news is. And he goes, well, I got good news and bad news. And he goes, well, tell me the good news. And he goes, the good news is there's meetings and it's excellent. Bill's there, Bob's there. Everyone that used to come here before us is there. The meetings are great. The coffee's great. There's no fighting at the business meeting. He goes, oh my God, this is fantastic. He goes, what's the bad news? The bad news is you're scheduled to speak next week. All right. It's just not the same telling.
Thanks, Ralph.
Because don't really clap. But anyway, so we're at the top of that page, and we just discussed on the bottom of that page why men and women drink, because they like the effects produced by alcohol. And we really started to get into the root cause of that, which is the spiritual malady. And we're on the bottom of the the top of the next paragraph when it says, on the other hand. So it's on XXIX. On the other hand, as strange as it may seem to those who don't understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who has seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. The only effort necessary being required a few simple rules. And we can put the 12 steps there if you want. You can highlight that whole area. The top is talking about how there's very little hope for the alcoholic. It says in the previous paragraph, this is repeated over and over again unless the person can experience an entire psychic change. There is very little hope of his recovery. So basically, this part you could write in that little space there, do the steps or be doomed to an alcoholic death. And you're going to see as we go through the book that Bill repeats himself again and again and again, talking about psychic change, spiritual awakening, using the word recovered. And it hammers home how it says easily able to control his desire for alcohol. Now, you guys know who have been around, there is no control. It's the problem is removed for the alcoholic. But this is written by the doctor. Going on to the next paragraph, it says, men cried out to me in a sincere and despairing appeal, Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me. Those are all questions that you could put question marks next to that are asking yourself, do you want to stop, but can't you? And you have to remember that Dr. Silkworth was a double board certified doctor specializing in two things. And here's the number one doctor in the country talking about alcoholism and drug addiction. And, if he was honest with himself, he saw very little help for alcoholics until, he saw this movement start to happen with Bill Wilson. All right. Adam, why don't you go from there?
Adam, alcoholic. Thank you, Ralph. I just want to catch everyone up that was not here last week or the week before. One of the ways that we go through the book, and one of the things my sponsor had said to me right from the beginning, he said that the work in AA wasn't working on myself. The idea was to be rid of myself so I could be of help to others. And he also asked me some really specific questions about my drinking. I want to go through some of the questions in the doctor's opinion up to this point. It's going to take about 5 minutes. But if you're brand new, you're just getting on here, there's a couple people I invited that weren't here. These are the fundamental questions out of the doctor's opinion that, as we go through this, I highly suggest you highlight these questions. If you can't do it now, go back and listen to the recording and go through the doctor's opinion. These are the questions. Am I regarded as hopeless, wants to quit but can't? Is that you? Have I been up to this point hopeless? Am I the type with whom every method I tried to stop failed completely? The question again is that me? And is there anything else I can do? Do I believe this book has a remedy for me? Very important. Am I willing to rely on anything they say about themselves in this book? That question was written by Dr. Silkworth in the preface to the doctor's opinion, and he's a double board certified physician. He gave Bill a letter of recommendation that ended with that you can rely on anything that people in AA say about themselves. He was that impressed with the results he saw with Bill. So do I believe my body's as sickened as well? Do I see that I have a physical allergy? A big piece of the doctor's opinion, if you're going through this, is focusing in the phenomenon of craving, that once I start, I cannot stop. Just like Confucius, man takes a drink, drink takes a drink, drink takes the man. Do I see that? Because this is such a important piece in the solution to alcoholism. It's part of, as Ralph and I were talking about earlier, that Dr. Bob knew a lot about the spiritual solution, but even though he had that part, he didn't understand this phenomenon of craving, and it is a very necessary part of the disease. And I'm going to wrap this up very quickly, but I want to catch everybody up to this point because it's important. Does the doctor's theory that I have an allergy to alcohol interest me? If it doesn't interest me, you might be in the wrong room, because it's a very, very important part of alcoholism. And what I'm doing with the doctor's opinion is I'm reading the doctor's opinion with a new person. I'm turning the statements into questions, and I'm directing the questions at the person I'm working with. So these questions right now may be about us, but when you use this as a diagnostic tool and you ask these questions to a new person, questions like, do I drink because I like the effect produced by alcohol? Obviously. Did this effect become so elusive that after a time, I couldn't differentiate the true from the false? Although I knew it was injurious, I began to defend my right to drink. It's very important to see that going through this and just coming forward to where we are right now. Is this repeated over and over again? Can I stay stopped on my own? And these questions bring us to this point where at the top of XXIX, that paragraph, I have written there the cycle. And in the therapeutic community, they call it the cycle of addiction or alcoholism. And it looks like this: drink, craving, spree, emerging remorseful, swearing off forever, and repeating the cycle. And the cycle is that once I stop drinking, I start to become restless again. I have a almost like a spirit that's never at rest. I have an irritability, which means I have a mind that keeps score in every relationship that I'm in. I have a fault-finding mind. Do I see that? Do I see this kind of discontentment in my spirit, where the shine wears off everything right away? Because these are really the underpinnings of untreated alcoholism. Am I able to see that up to this point? And then we're going to catch up with where Ralph just left off. But if I see that spiritual maladjustment drives me to the obsession drives me back to the allergy, and the allergy kills me. So in the next statement, when it talks about being doomed, do I see that I can't live with alcohol because it's so painful, but somehow I can't live without it, because without a spiritual remedy, my mind will take me back to drinking. So it's almost like I'm caught between these two worlds. There's a thing called purgatory. If you've ever heard it and you're new, it means to be caught between two worlds. I can't live out there drinking anymore because it's too painful, obviously, right? But I can't be sober and happy at the same time because I'm unwilling to follow some simple rules that we're going to talk about right now. So when, Ralph started that, on the other hand, as strange as it may seem to those who don't understand, once someone like myself has had a psychic change, which means a complete shift in my perception, right? That very same person, a guy like me who went through residential treatment 28 times, who was absolutely doomed, right? Who had so many problems that I ever despaired ever solving them. Was that me? Was that me coming into AA? Suddenly finds myself easily control my desire for alcohol. That's a huge, huge, really message of hope if you're new. And then it says, the only effort that I'd be willing to follow some simple rules. Now, it's kind of interesting. I'll finish with this and we'll get back to where Ralph was. If I don't follow society's rules, you know what happens? I live in a cage. If I don't follow some fundamental rules in AA, like go to meetings, work steps, and help others, I stay drunk in the rooms. And it seems like if I don't follow some fundamental spiritual rules, I'm just basically unhappy. So what are these rules? What are these rules that we talk about in AA? And we talked about that, just to recap, when we started, we talked about the circle and the triangle, recovery, unity, and service. And we talked about them translating into three actions: contribute, belong, and learn. As we know, contributing is service. It makes me feel needed. Belonging is unity. I feel wanted. And to learn is to uncover, discover, and discard the things that are blocking me. Now, if you're new here tonight, we can't do those first two for you. I can't get you to meetings, and I can't take commitments for you. I can't get you involved in the service action of Alcoholics Anonymous. What we can do in this workshop is help you to face and be rid of the things in you that might be blocking you. That is the purpose of the book, to enable us to find a power that will solve the problem. Ralph and I has been involved with working with a lot of new people. I'm not bragging. I'm not an expert. I'm just another guy that sat down with many, many people over the last 22 years and taken them through the book and helped them to understand what it is that's blocking them. And right now we're talking about a craving. We're talking about this simple piece. So without anything going further, it's very interesting. And Ralph just read that piece right there. So I'm looking at it. Am I doomed? There's the question if you're new. Am I doomed? Am I brand new? Do I see that I can't stay stopped on my own? That I can't stop once I start? These are the two components of the first and second half of step one. Do I see that I've lost control? And then it says, men have cried out. We're right again on XXIX in the middle of the page. Sincere, despairing, doctor, I can't go on like this. This is, by the way, frothy emotional appeal. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me. And he says again, faced with this, Silkworth saying, if I'm honest with myself, I feel my own inadequacy. I give it all that's in me, but it's not enough. He's saying again that science can't fix us. If you're new, like myself, I had some of the best therapists and psychiatrists and MFTs in the industry, and I couldn't make it past the liquor store. One feels it's something more than human power, something that we can't really explain, but we can see the results of. And if you're atheist or agnostic, look at the results of AA. Look at the collective aggregate success of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that should be enough to give this thing a chance tonight. Okay? Is needed to produce the essential psychic change. You might want to circle the word psychic change. It's essential. Without it, I'm not going to succeed. Though the aggregate, again, meaning collective, of recoveries resulting in psychiatric effort is considerable, he said, we physicians admit we have made little impression on the problem as a whole. That's a pretty big statement for the leading doctor in one of the most prominent hospitals treating alcoholism in the Western world at that time. And if you know anything about Towns Hospital, wealthy people would send people from all over the world to find recovery there. And he's saying, as the leading physician there, that he pretty much couldn't help us. Okay? Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. Okay, Ralph, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, sure. I do not hold these two who believe that alcoholism is an entire problem of mental control. I have had men, for example, who have worked for a period of months on some problems or business deal, which was to be settled on a certain date, favorable to them. They took a drink or two a day prior or so to that date, and the phenomena of craving at once became paramount over all other interests, so an important appointment was not met. And that is, so the question is, has this happened to you? And it's happened to me. And what they're talking about mental control is from the doctor's opinion to page 23, we're really concentrating here on the craving. What happens when Ralph puts alcohol into my body? Do I experience this? See, because, as an outsider, it says on page 139, it says, in dealing with the alcoholic, there may be a natural annoyance that one could be so weak, stupid, or irresponsible, because that's what it looks like to my parents. That's what it looks like to my girlfriend. That's what it looks like to anyone who has any type of relationship when I'm caught up in active alcoholism. See, because it looks like I'm weak. It looks like I don't have the mental control. But on the top of the page, it says, after Ralph has succumbed to the desire again, after I've picked up that first drink, the phenomena of craving takes over. So this man here was talking about the business deal. They took a drink or so a day prior to the date, and the phenomena of craving at once became paramount over all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. And how it looks like to me on the surface is when I'm in it is it's not like a rash that, when you're allergic to strawberries, you break out in a certain rash. This is a physical craving where my body is telling my mind, and how it may look is like, oh, Adam just got here, I'm going to have one more drink. Or just, just one more. I'm telling myself that I'm changing my mind, but I'm not. It's my body that's in charge. Once I pick up a drink, my body takes over. My mind checks out. I'm no longer here. I'm no longer here. I'm no longer in charge. The phenomena of craving is in full effect. It says these men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond your mental control. It says there are many situations which arise out of the phenomena of craving, which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. And that's a very powerful statement. So that whole thing is highlighted because the first part of this book to page 23, we're really talking about the body. And we do it kind of backwards because in Alcoholics Anonymous, we don't treat anything to do with the body besides total abstinence. So we're talking about what happens when alcohol is in our body. So it's no longer a mental thing. It says these are many situations which arise out of phenomena of craving, which cause Ralph to make that supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. It's like my alcoholism is like Ralph taking a knife to a gunfight when I'm up against alcoholism. It just tears me apart every single time. And I think I got a shot. I'm like, all right, come on, willpower, let's do this. And I got no shot because I got no defense. We're only talking about at this point what happens once I succumb to desire again. And the question I always hammer home to the newcomer or the person I'm working with is, did this happen to you? Did you experience this physical craving where you overserve yourself 9 out of 10 times? Go ahead, Adam.
Again, going back to the last paragraph on XXIX, that the problem of mental control is something that my sponsor stopped me on and tried to explain to me that if it was mental control, if that's what this problem was, I could think my way out of it. It is critical that I understand again that, and I highly suggest if you're new, go back and circle craving and phenomenon of craving all the way up to this point. Because every time you're going to see this thing that happens to us that it only happens in 1 out of 10 people. That once I start, I cannot stop. The drink takes a drink and all bets are off. But that isn't the real problem. Because knowing that has never been enough for me. It's part of it, but it is not enough. So I have to understand that what mental control is. And really going through this part here, these men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. That's really elementary. That's really simple. And that's just one component in alcoholism. And, I've had this discussion, the next statement there, where it says there are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice. I've had this argument in book studies for years. My experience with supreme sacrifice is suicide. That's what it is. I've had a lot of friends of mine that came in and out for year after year after year, and eventually they just committed suicide. They couldn't do it. They could not understand that. From my experience, if you're new here tonight, you'll hear a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous say they're powerless over the second drink. And they understand that once that first drink enters their lips, they understand the powerless over the second. But what we're going to discuss here as we go through this is for many people in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm not going to divide the room here right now, but we will later, is that many of us are powerless over the first. And it says it on page 24, and it's okay to jump ahead here. It talks about every alcoholic passes through the region where even the strongest desire to stop drinking is absolutely no avail. And then it says that we cannot bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the pain and suffering of a week or month ago. We're without defense against the first drink. How can I not drink no matter what? How can I bring that into my consciousness if I really read and accept that statement? What this is suggesting that is unless I can have an entire psychic change, I will pick up a drink again. Powerlessness doesn't mean I can't. It means I absolutely, with all certainty, am going to drink again, unless I adopt some simple rules in my life that we're going to discuss as we go on through these pages. So, I've seen a lot of people commit suicide here. It's awful. I went through I don't have to go through the history. A lot of you guys know me, but my experience is if I don't find a spiritual solution to not taking that first drink, that second one it's pretty obvious what's going to happen. So it's important rather than to continue to fight. So Ralph, do you want to continue on the classification?
Okay. We're going to do a little audience participation. When you see your type, just raise your hand, and you can raise your hand more than once. Okay. The classifications of alcoholics seem most difficult, and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There, of course, are the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We all are familiar with this type. They are always going on the wagon for keeps. They are over remorseful and make a resolution, but never a decision. Question mark. Is this you? Did this happen to you? You made this decision to go on to quit forever, as I have 100 times. But then something would happen, and all of a sudden, taking a drink seems like the greatest idea in the world, and boom, off to the races. And it says, but never a decision. There is the type of man who is unwilling to admit he cannot take a drink. That's me too. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. There is the type who believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he could take a drink without danger. There is a manic depressive type who perhaps is the least understood by his friends and to whom a whole chapter could be written. Then there is the types entirely normal in every respect, except in the effect alcohol is upon them. They are awful, able, intelligent, and friendly people. And you may find yourself to have some of these traits. You may find yourself to have a lot of these traits. But what Adam was talking about isn't AA a lot. There are a lot of people who are powerless over the second drink. They seem to be. And Adam, you said some really good stuff when we were talking before about this last part. Why don't you share what you said about this last part?
I don't want to divide the room, but my experience is varied on this. And one of the things I've noticed is, and of course I identify with all the types, but this type here, there are types that are entirely normal in every respect except the effect produced by alcohol. They are often able, friendly, intelligent people. That's not who I am. That's never been who I am. That is a group of people in AA, which we love and adore and are members of AA. And it seems like as soon as some of these people stop drinking, as soon as they put down the drink, everything works for them. They fit in, they're part of, their career welcomes them back. They come to meetings once a year, never work a step, and their life gets consistently better. They've been serene since their ass hit the seat in AA. And that's not my experience. My experience, every time I stop drinking, Ralph, the first thing they say to me is, Adam, you need to be on medication. Why are you so angry? Why are you so emotional? Why can't you sit still? What's wrong with you? And I'm crying at dog food commercials. So I'm not the able, normal, friendly type. I am the type that was described a couple pages ago. I have a restlessness. I have an irritability, which means I'm quick to anger again. I'm slow to forgive. I keep score in every relationship that I'm in. I have this fault-finding mind. I have a discontentment in my spirit, and that means in every area of my life. I could be making more money than I've ever made in my life, and I start doing the math, and I'm thinking I'm getting ripped off. You know what I mean? I move into a new house. I'm not even out of escrow. Hate the neighbors. It's like everything that I think is going to fix this doesn't. So what I've come to understand is for a lot of people in AA, if the problem is alcohol, the solution is abstinence. And for those people, AA is like the Sober Elks Club. And for goodness sake, they have the phenomenon of craving. If they drink again, they can destroy a career, a marriage. They can destroy their life in one night. They're as alcoholic in the sense that they have the phenomenon of craving. But some of these people I know, as soon as they stop drinking, their life kind of seemingly rights itself. And I think that it's important for me to realize they say things to me like, don't drink no matter what and your life will get better. That's not true for me. What happens to me, Ralph, is when I stop drinking, the outsides get better, but the insides get worse. And the longest bridge I'm ever going to cross, the longest journey I will ever walk as an alcoholic, is that little dash between the first and second half of step one. It's telling me I got a body that can't process alcohol, but more importantly, I have a mind that cannot process reality. So I got a body that can't drink and a mind that has to. You don't think that's a dilemma? And that's what the Al-Anons can't figure out about us. They can't figure out why we drink. We can't figure out why you don't. And now you know. So what I've come to understand is to be loving to everybody here. And I was told, you start doing a workshop like this, half the room will hate you, half the room will love you. Because the ones that don't have to really do the intensive spiritual work here, that can just hang out, their life depends on the fellowship. But see, my life depends also on the steps. It depends on a psychic change. It depends on me following some simple spiritual rules. It depends on me being of service to others. It depends on something much greater than just the fellowship. So this type here, the type that's normal in every respect, I think he meant what he said, every respect. They are often able, intelligent, friendly people. But see, they still have the phenomenon of craving. And as Ralph reads on now, you're going to hear what all of these types have in common. Because I fit into every one of these types because I've minimized, justified, and rationalized that first drink in every way possible. And you'll see that. All of these are attempted manifestations of control. But this type here is able to stay stopped just by not taking that first drink. He doesn't have to do anything else.
Alan, tell me about the different forms of chemo, being on the cancer ward.
Well, imagine going onto a cancer ward and telling people on the cancer ward that, you didn't do the chemo and you're still here. Maybe they don't need to do it. That's actually sicker than all of us, really. Mm-hmm. That's like telling a guy, don't work the steps and your life will get better.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the bottom of XXX. It says all of these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomena of craving. The phenomenon, have we suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy, which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been by any treatment, which we may are familiar with, permanently eradicated. Their only relief suggests to be entire abstinence. First time I spoke was at the Sterling Room, and the Sterling Room's in Davie, Florida. And I'm not from Davie, Florida, and I don't talk like I'm from Davie, Florida. There's cowboys and cowboy hats and guns in the back of the trucks and pickup trucks. And when I walked in there to tell my story, maybe a year sober, I walked up to the front desk and I seen this guy sitting there with a cowboy hat on smoking a cool. This is when he could smoke. I walked up to this guy. His name was Russell Vine. He's since passed. He could not read, but he could quote this book chapter and verse. And I said, "Excuse me, sir. I'm here to speak. How long you want me to talk?" And he just looked at me and said, "Son, you could talk as long as you want, but we're leaving in an hour." I have no idea what I said that day. But after I got through sharing, my sponsor was in the back, sitting like this with his stupid Red Sox hat on. And I walked up to him and I said, "What the hell is wrong with you? Why would you have me come here? I'm nothing like these people." And he pulled me outside. And he said, "What have we been working on?" He goes, "These people may talk different, act different, and dress different than you and I. But when they pick up a drink, they act just like we do. That's what we have in common with an alcoholic." Another thing is, Joe Hawk used to talk about the story. You get 100 people you get, say, 30 people in the bar. Okay, you got like maybe 10 of those people that are just bellied up to the bar, always just complaining about life. The life sucks. They're just there sipping their beer and they drink and then they go home. You got another 10. These people are the bears that come in for a happy hour. They have a few drinks. They seem to enjoy life and they just go home. And then you got the renegades, he calls it. And the renegades are the ones that drink with that certain intensity. They're grabbing the other guy's girlfriend's ass. They're dancing on the table. They're going into the bathroom for outside issues because they realize what alcohol could do for them and outside issues. Okay, and it's the same thing. My experience in AA, you got the people that just come and complain and complain and complain, and they're welcome too. Maybe because maybe no one's ever took the time to go through this book with them. And then you got the people that just come and they take that coin. They just show up. It's an inconvenience for them to maybe give somebody a ride. And then you got the maniacs. And just from looking at this crowd tonight, I see there's some maniacs here tonight, and they know what the 12 steps in this book can do. And that's the group that you want to hang. You want to hang with them because as a byproduct going through this book, you get excited and you have an overwhelming desire to want to share it with someone else. You can't screw it up. You read the book with someone and you feel better and they feel better. Continuing on the bottom of that page, there immediately precipitates us to a seething conundrum of debate. Much has been written, pro and con, but among the physicians, the general opinion seems to be that most chronic alcoholics are doomed. I think that's the 5th time since the doctor's opinion that he used the word doomed. Am I doomed? Do I believe this book could help with me? Not us. We have a way out. I have written on the bottom of this book. My sponsor says we have a way out. So what is the solution? Perhaps I could best answer this by relating one of my experiences. So now we're going to wrap up this chapter with two stories about Hank Parkhurst and Fitz Mayo. But before I do, I want Adam to cover that last part again because Adam has some good stuff to say about this too.
Okay, just pausing for a second. Does the hosts have something they wanted to add now? Either Matthew S. or Jess? We want to just take a 2-minute intermission here.
We just wanted to again reiterate that we'll be posting in lieu of chat a link that you can donate for the 7th tradition. The various levels of service do require that we be self-supporting and to make sure that we're able to keep all these essential services in place. So we'll have Rodney just post that again. And if you have to take a moment, anything that you can share and donate would be greatly appreciated. That's all that we have, but thanks again, and we'll let Adam continue.
Okay. Again, like it says, the phenomenon of craving only occurs after the first drink. My experience is a little different than that. I don't know if my looking back, I was always one decision away from a drink. And today, between me and that decision, there's a whole world called recovery. And if you understand what that's like, where there's nothing between you and a drink, I can remember being released from an institution. And once I made that decision to drink, I would be vomiting before I got to the liquor store. People will tell you that that's not a phenomenon of craving. It's a compulsion. But from my experience, if you're new, if I cannot put something between me and that decision, and what a lot of us call that is a deep and effective spiritual experience, again, I am doomed. And that word doomed, like Ralph said, it says, do I see that I'm a chronic alcoholic? Very much like we talk about with Carl Jung and Roland Hazard, where he says, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. And he says it right there. He says, I have never, ever seen one single case recover. And we all know when we get to that part, Carl Jung was a student of Sigmund Freud. We all have a lot of respect for him, but he was another one that said, there is nothing I can do for you. And we know Roland Hazard was, heir to Allied Chemical. He was a blue blood. He had all the money at his disposal, and he could not buy his way out of this. And then we're going to continue. It says, what is the solution? Perhaps I can best answer this by relating one of my experiences. This is Hank Parkhurst, who also was one of Bill's closest friends. About a year prior to this experience, a man was brought to me to be treated for chronic alcoholism. Again, chronic meaning permanent, okay? He had but partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. He had lost everything worthwhile in life. And that's the question I had to ask myself. Had I lost everything worthwhile? I didn't really lose anything. I traded it all in for alcohol. Once I'd heard chapter 5, once I'd sat in a meeting and I'd heard chapter 3, it wasn't like I lost anything. I continued to not make a decision to do the work that was suggested in Alcoholics Anonymous. That was where I find the grace. So it says here, he lost everything worthwhile and was only living, one might say, to drink. Do I relate to that? That I was only living to drink? He frankly admitted that he believed for him there was no hope. Do I believe that? Did I believe that there was no hope for me? I'm asking these questions to a newcomer as I'm walking him through this. Do you see your hopelessness? That if you don't have the psychic change that Silkworth talks about, there's little hope for you. It is a message of doom. The first step really doesn't really contain much hope. It's a statement of the problem. Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. He accepted the plan outlined in this book. Here's the question. If you're new, highlight it. Do I accept the plan outlined in this book? But if I do, what am I not willing to do? If I failed, was there something I wasn't willing to do? Like go to meetings regularly, maintain commitments, sit down with a sponsor consistently, and go through the book. What was it that I wasn't willing to do? Because I may have accepted the plan. I may have admitted I'm an alcoholic, but to accept I'm an alcoholic also demands responsibility at this point if you're new. The responsibility to accept the plan of action. It's different. 1 year later, he called to see me and I experienced a very strange sensation. Listen to what he says. I knew the man by name. I partly recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck, which is exactly what I was. I was a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck. Had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. That's powerful. That's a metamorphosis. It's a change. I talked with him for some time, but I was not able to bring myself to feel I'd known him because the man had recovered. To me, he was a stranger and he left me. A long time has passed with no return to alcohol. It's a really powerful story. If you look at the questions that are contained in there, I tried to be emphatic about those questions. Again, I would ask yourself, going through those questions, about hopelessness, about accepting the plan of action. All of those are important because those I would suggest you turn on the person you're working with and pause and ask them again, have you really accepted the plan of action outlined in this book? And I ask people, I don't mean to be rude. I'm going to be rude though. A lot of guys I know, when I talk to a new guy, I'll say to him, and I don't mean to be mean, but I'll say, hey, guys keep brand new. And I go, when was your first AA meeting? And he'll say, 1987. And I'll go, well, it's 2020. And I'll say, how many guys have you sponsored in those 40 years? And 9 out of 10 times I'll hear him say stuff like no one. And I'll say, how could you have said that you accepted the plan of recovery outlined in the book? How could you say that you didn't, and it's very interesting because I've seen it over and over again. If in certain groups, like and I don't want to take up too much time with this, but recently I was in Atlanta and I was in a meeting with 300 people and at the end of the meeting, they said, well, everybody willing to sponsor, stand up, and the entire room stood up. And I was electrified. I told the secretary, I've never seen anything like this. In my hometown, only 3 people stand up out of 300. And I said, how is that possible? And this is what he said to me. He said, Sonny, in our group, when a new person comes in, 4 or 5 of us get around that new person. And we take them through the steps as a group. Ralph will handle the first 3 steps. Maybe Matthew will take them through 4 through 7. Someone over here, maybe Bill will go out and knock on doors with them and make amends. And we do it as a group. And we get them involved with H&I right away. And if they don't want to do it, we suggest they find another home group. And I'll tell you, it was a little rough, right? Could you imagine? But I've never seen a more enthusiastic group of people in my life. Imagine if 4 or 5 people got around you as a newcomer and together took you out and said, we're going to make a commitment to walk you through this process as a group. How different would that have been? Never seen anything like it. So it's very interesting. I know from looking at AA history that happened a lot more in those days than it does now. Now it's like, here's a card, call me sometime. That's about where we leave a new guy. That's it. And he's standing outside the meeting all by himself going, what just happened? And of course, he's still feeling alone. He's feeling as alone as when he walked in the meeting. I think we can do better than that. Ralph, you want to keep going?
Sure. And another thing you were talking about, there's a lot of people that, to get told things that aren't true, like, well, you walk 16 miles into the woods, it's going to take 16 miles to walk out. And that's not my experience. My experience is no matter how far You went into the woods. You're only 12 steps from freedom. 12 steps. So don't let someone say, oh, don't get too well too soon or any of that stuff. Because as soon as someone is willing to take these steps, your life will change. It's a guarantee. It will happen. As soon as you do the work, it'll happen. When I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his own diagnosis and decided the situation hopeless. Again, the question mark, am I hopeless? Do I want to stop? I can't. He had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. Was I determined to die? He was rescued by a searching party and the desperate condition brought to me. Following his physical rehabilitation, this is the 5th or 6th time in the doctor's opinion he talks about detoxing or someone getting their brain cleared first. You reiterate everything. You think you're repeating something again, you are. He had talked to me in which he frankly stated that the treatment was a waste of effort. Do I believe that treatment was a waste of effort? Unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. For years, me and Will tried to stop and couldn't stay stopped. I mean, come on, Will, let's go. And willpower would be right sitting next to me. I wouldn't be drinking. And taking a drink seems like the greatest idea in the world because I had no control over choice. His alcoholic problem was so complex, his depression so great that we felt his only hope would be through what we called moral psychology. And we doubted even that would have any effect. And I've been around some old timers, my second sponsor, Sandy, and he told me some stories. He said that he'd with this new guy, and the new guy can't even put 2 sentences together and this and that. And he'd be like, okay, God, I got one for you, and we're just amazed that we see what happens when someone comes in here and does this work. His alcohol problem was so complex, his depression so great that we felt moral psychology, and we doubted even that would have any effect. However, he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book. Am I sold? He has not had a drink for many years. I see him now, and he is a fine specimen of manhood as one could ever wish to meet. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through and through, and perhaps he may scoff. He may remain to pray. William D. Silkworth. And that, my friends, is the doctor's opinion. Adam, you want to wrap it up?
Well, I was just looking at that part where he says he thought the treatment was a waste of effort. I'm glad I didn't give up at Treatment Center 27. You guys would have a different facilitator tonight. If I'd given up at Treatment Center 27, I'd have been done. And it's so funny because he says here, in the future, he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. But that's what people that say, see, I used to say, don't drink no matter what. The problem was alcohol wouldn't listen. I can't, for some reason, that's not enough for me. And I don't want to be divisive. But when I hear don't drink no matter what, just to reiterate this if you're new, what that means to me is go to meetings no matter what. Maintain commitments no matter what. Work steps no matter what. Face and be rid of the things that are blocking me no matter what. Learn how to do this beautiful discipline of 10, 11, and 12, where I have a process in 4 through 9. I develop a program in 10, a power in step 11, and then a purpose. The purpose of reaching back and helping others. Be given a roadmap to spiritual success that's so easily transmittable to another human being. We were talking about the chip system, 30, 60, 90 days, and these are milestones. And my buddy's got 50 years sober, and he goes, they didn't start the chips for new people. They started the chips so old guys could find the new people. It's like a completely different way to look at it. I mean, there's a guy with 30 days. There's a person with 60 days. And, the newcomer thinks it's for him, but the reality, it was for old timers so they could reach back and help new people. So I think it's important to see this. Again, here, is my alcoholic problem so complex? What I discovered is, if you give an alcoholic a problem, he'll water it. You give me a rut, I'll furnish it. But what I've discovered, if you're new about Alcoholics Anonymous, is by doing the work in AA, a lot of the problems that I thought were so complex died from neglect. They died from neglect. by working steps and going to meetings and helping others and developing a spiritual foundation. A lot of the things that I thought were so important became secondary to my spiritual life. It didn't mean that I didn't have to address the material world, but I developed a spiritual defense against the first drink. And that's what this is about. So, I start to look at that he felt his only hope would be what we called moral psychology. Again, that's been referred to several times. It means a combination of philosophy and psychology. And he doubted if that would even have any effect. So going back, we're going to finish this. I'd like to, if we can, open it up for a couple questions. However, he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book. Am I sold on the ideas? If you're brand new, I think that the doctor's opinion is a very, very powerful tool. The idea with all of this is to win the confidence of a new person, that we have an answer, that we felt like you did, that we've had similar experiences to you. And hopefully, again, a more important thing, that I'm one of these people. And if it's worked for us, I hope that you might think, yeah, this could work for me too. I think that going through this, hopefully, if there's any questions pertinent to these questions about working with new people, because I don't want to get into fact checking about who did what and when it was done, but more importantly about working with new people. I think that's like our home group. We talk about each of these sections of the book and how we would take a newcomer through those sections of the book. So if there's any questions pertinent to that, those would be the questions. He has had not a drink for many years. Now and then I see him. He's the finest specimen of manhood I could wish to meet. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book. It's a directive to read the book. And maybe you've come to scoff. In other words, you've come from a place of doubt. And maybe you stayed to pray, because that's what happened to me. After all those institutions, I'm not a joiner. And eventually I got around some people that showed me not only the problem, the impact of knowing that I would never be able to stay stopped without a spiritual experience was so powerful when I was taken through this part of the book that it catapulted me into the rest of the steps. And I hope that's maybe what you might find here tonight, that you're willing to continue to go through this with some kind of, hope that you might be able to reach back in your community and help another drunk. It's the greatest thing in the world to watch a fellowship grow up about you. So thank you very much. The floor is open for a couple of minutes for questions to Ralph or myself, if we can help in any way. Again, we're just here with a spirit of helpfulness.
Angela.
Angela
from Victoria has a question. If you want to unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for coming and speaking. It's really been really great. You had a mention in the beginning about the cycle, and it was drink, craving, spree, and then what were the other?
Emerging, remorseful, swearing off forever, and repeating the cycle. That's called the cycle of addiction. If you've ever done any kind of I've done a bunch of kind of college courses for professionals on addiction, and the reason I say that is because in the therapeutic community amongst MFTs and in the field of addiction, they call the cycle, which is starting for men and women drink because they like the effect produced. And then it says, this is the cycle. They are restless, irritable, and discontent by nature, unless then again experience the ease and comfort which comes by taking a few drinks, right? After they succumb to this desire, this is the beginning of the cycle, the phenomenon of craving develops, right? So they take that first drink, then they get the craving. They pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful, with a firm resolution never to do it again. Sound familiar? I'm never going to do that again. And then what happens is they become restless, irritable, and discontent again. And they're in so much spiritual pain that they have to drink again. You see, that's the most powerful thing that people miss with the alcoholic of this type. This is also a type here. And that type, what it really is, my own mother would say to me, Adam, for goodness sake, drink. You were nicer. She would look at me and really believe that because I was tearing her house up. So what I start to see is this maladjustment, this distortion in my connection to reality is so profound in me that unless I can have some kind of psychic change, I will never overcome this. So this is a pretty good description of this washing machine cycle. I emerge remorseful, swearing off forever, and then that's like Clancy used to call it a spring, and it gets tighter and tighter and tighter until I'm chasing people up and down the freeway past my exit. I'm counting their items in the checkout line. I have this really like impatient, dishonest, resentful, selfish disposition. Sound familiar? That make sense?
Okay, we have a question from Edgar. You want to unmute yourself?
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Good evening, everyone. I'm Edgar L., and I'm an alcoholic from Detroit, Michigan. Thanks to Westminster BC Group for holding another one of these sessions. Rodney, thank you, Adam and Ralph. Appreciate all that you're doing. And the question I had is fairly simple. You mentioned two people, and I know it's anonymous, but they're deceased now. You mentioned Hank Parker, and the other example, what was the other gentleman's name?
Fitzmail.
Say again?
Fitzmail.
Fitzmail. Yeah. Okay. Anything else would be a statement, which is not necessary. So
yeah, but you can look them up. You can look them up. One of them has a story in the book. They're very, very close to the early first 100 alcoholics. Parker's was very instrumental in the writing of the big book, and that's also contained in that new book that's out.
And he actually wrote to the employers.
We got 1 minute. I hope that if you guys enjoyed this, you might come back next week, bring a highlighter. Bill's story is again another really, really great tool. I used to hate talking about Bill's story, but when you really look at all the problems Bill had with alcohol and turn again a lot of these ideas into the subjective, like did I drink like Bill? Did I think like Bill? Did I feel like Bill? Was I as hopeless as Bill? And start to look at his story that way and really take the story out and look at the symptoms. The fact that he couldn't stop. Bill was writing letters to Lois while he was in World War I. He was in his 20s, and he was already in trouble with alcohol. All the letters that he had wrote to Lois, his wife Lois, are available. He was having trouble with drinking from the very beginning, just like a lot of us. It's very interesting to go through that story. So I think that's it. Ralph, you want to say anything in closing?
No, thanks for coming out, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, again.